Rally Raid Level 2 suspension finished last night. I've put about 300 miles on it since building it, and wanted to give you my first impressions. So my first thought riding on smooth roads is the thing feels kind of like a boat, meaning that basically the suspension is working all the time. And then I went to the roughest patch of asphalt I knew of in the area, and basically no problems, just cruise right over the top of it, eats the bumps, no problem whatsoever. So I've ridden dirt, smooth roads, rough roads today, and it's handled them all really well. It is taller, so it's about 2 inches taller. I have a 32-inch inseam, and it's still fine, but I find myself I have to move towards the front of the seat where it's narrower, then I can flat foot it. I ran into one kind of minor or major issue depending on your point of view. So I have an ABS bike, 2016, and when I went to install the rear shock, fortunately I noticed that the rear wheel speed sensor wire would not accommodate the full travel of the suspension. And I noticed that before I actually added the dent for the muffler to give me full travel. Back behind, on the other side of the ABS cover thing, that wire is mounted to a little clip. So after you take out the original shock and before you put in the new shock, detach that clip, which gives you plenty of space or plenty of length in the wire for the additional travel. Then I just cable tied the sensor wire to the rear brake hose just to keep it from flopping around. But make sure you need to disconnect this wire from the clip, or otherwise you're going to damage that wire if the rear swing arm drops to full travel with the new shock. I have the Renthal Fat Bar version of the Triple Tree. It works really well. The stock wiring and hoses are just long enough, just barely long enough to accommodate the taller handlebar position. I eliminated the original clips or brackets that were used for the wiring. I took both of those out and I've cable tied the wires directly to the wiring bracket, which is attached underneath the ignition barrel. That's about where the wires need to be, in full left lock. Basically these are tight, there's no additional play. I've got the handlebars mounted basically in a neutral position, so almost centered, like at 2.5 is up, and that position works really well. Clears the tank and clears the windscreen, even with the windscreen in the high position. Anything else I want to talk about? The suspension, as has been mentioned in other videos as well, you're going to need to disconnect this bracket and cable tie these hoses and wire. There's a hole right here in the lower triple tree to cable attach those two. I think the money is well spent, especially if you're going to do any rough road riding, dirt road, rough asphalt. It handles that great now. The rear shock, the original factory rear shock, just feels really harsh. I noticed initially myself tensing up as I'm getting ready to hit bumps because that factory rear shock is so harsh, but that has all gone away with this new system. Especially the rear shock is extremely comfortable. On-road performance, that's one nice thing about this as well, is it is very comfortable relative to the original stock suspension. It is taller, so it does take a bit more effort to lean the bike. I noticed I need to lean my body a bit more, but otherwise no real difference in handling. Other than that, maybe a little bit more effort required to lean and maneuver it, but not really. It works really well. And then the suspension, the fact the suspension soaks up the bumps so much nicer. I find it, even though through corners it never feels like perfectly settled, as in the suspension is working all the time. If you just push it hard, the bike will take it. Whereas the stock suspension, any decent sized bumps in the corners seem to mess up your line, and it doesn't do that anymore with this. So I'm very happy, well worth it. If you're considering the suspension and you have some more dual sport oriented riding to do, I'd highly recommend it.